And I implore you now to follow the logic of what you are all doing and give the Ukrainians the tools to finish the job. Give them the deep fire artillery systems, give them the tanks, give them the planes, because they have a plan. They know what they need to do, and my God, they've shown they have the skill and the bravery to do it. Give them the wherewithal to take back that land bridge and the rest of their country, because the faster they win, the greater the savings in treasure and in lives, and the faster the world economy will bounce back to health. The prize before us is now immense. When Ukraine wins, and they will win, when Putin is pushed back, we will lift the threat of further Russian aggression in Georgia, in Moldova, in the Baltic states, across the whole of Eastern Europe. And by lifting that threat, we end the risk of further economic disruption, like the hikes in the cost of gas and food that have affected people in my country, in the UK, in this country, and around the world. Bear in mind that America's contribution is noble and huge, but it is still only 5 or 6% of the annual US defense budget so far, and has helped to degrade about 20%, some say 50%, of Putin's war machine. And to those who say we may be somehow denuding our own arsenals by giving this support, I say, what is the point in deploying those tanks and planes in North Carolina or North Rhine-Westphalia or Alsace when the Ukrainians could be using them now exactly where they are needed to help assure our collective security for decades? What is the point of having Challenger tanks patrolling the beautiful villages of Wiltshire, which is a very safe area, I can tell you, when the Ukrainians could be using them now to bring this war to an end? How can we seriously worry about provoking him when we have seen what he will do without the slightest provocation? He isn't mad. He isn't ill. He simply made a historic, that's what I'm afraid all the evidence says, he simply made a historic miscalculation and is struggling to deal with the position in which he has now placed his own country. He won't use nuclear weapons. Lose him every one of the world's swing voters from India to Africa to Latin America. He would terrify his own people if he did so, who would live in dread of the consequences for them. He would plunge Russia into such a cryogenic freeze of economic isolation as to make the present sanctions regime seem like a blessing. And it would not even work, because I don't believe for a minute he would stop the Ukrainians for fighting for their hearths and their homes and their families. And so we mustn't fall for this trick of trying to portray, that he does, of trying to portray this conflict as a standoff between a nuclear-armed NATO and a nuclear-armed Russia, because that is not what is happening here. We are seeing a barbaric attack on an innocent country, and we are simply giving the Ukrainians the means to protect themselves, as you might help a neighbor whose house is under attack from an arsonist. Do you give that person a hose and buckets and fire blankets? Yes, you do. And above all, we need to avoid being drawn into Putin's personal psychodrama. We're not here to worry about the next stage of his career or what happens in the Kremlin. We need to stop focusing on Putin and focus entirely on Ukraine, because they are fighting for all of us, everyone in this room. They're fighting for our values, and they have reminded us that those values of freedom and democracy are worth fighting for. So there are no conceivable grounds for delay. Let us end this pipette titration of support and give the Ukrainians the support they need to finish this war in the only way that it can and will be finished, and let us give them those tools now. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your support for Ukraine. Been decisive in helping our Ukrainian friends to defend themselves against a cruel and unnecessary attack by Vladimir Putin and the Russian forces. And I just want to get over the message here in Washington that there is no conceivable case for delay, and we need to make sure that our Ukrainian friends get what they need to expel the Russians from the entirety of Ukrainian territory. Putin's attack on Ukraine is the defining moment of the early 21st century. And of course, I'm proud of what the UK, other Europeans have been able to do to support Ukraine, but it is the United States of America that has made a colossal difference. And I'm here in Washington, D.C., to thank US lawmakers for everything they've done to help Ukrainians and to say how vital it is that they continue their support. And do you know what? I've been absolutely amazed by how solid that support is. Republicans, Democrats, both sides of both houses are determined to keep going and to give the Ukrainians what it takes to defeat Putin and clear him out. What I think everybody needs to understand is the faster that happens, the better. The better for Ukraine, the better for the world, and of course, the better for America as well. And the point that I've been trying to make is that that is the way we can save the American people taxpayer dollars. Get this thing done fast, give the Ukrainians what they need, and the sooner this thing will be over, for the good of the whole world.
Ukraine's heroic resistance continues. It is clear that Putin has made a catastrophic mistake. And you have to ask yourself why he did it. Why did he decide to invade this totally innocent country? He didn't really believe that Ukraine was going to join NATO anytime soon. He knew perfectly well there was no plan to put missiles on Ukrainian soil. He didn't really believe the semi-mystical guff he wrote about the origins of the Russian people. I know whether you read it, Nostradamus meets Russian Wikipedia. I think that wasn't what it was about. I think he was frightened of Ukraine for an entirely different reason. He was frightened of Ukraine because in Ukraine they have a free press. And in Ukraine they have free elections. And with every year that Ukraine progressed, not always easily, towards freedom and democracy and open markets, he feared the Ukrainian example, and he feared the implicit reproach to himself. Because in Putin's Russia, you get jailed for 15 years just for calling an invasion an invasion. And if you stand against Putin in an election, you get poisoned or shot. And it's precisely, that's what happens. And it's precisely because Ukraine and Russia have been so historically close that he has been terrified of the effect of that Ukrainian model on him and on Russia. And he's been in a total panic about a so-called color revolution in Moscow itself. And that's why he's trying so brutally to snuff out the flame of freedom in Ukraine. And that's why it is so vital that he said, Boris, you say that Ukraine is not going to join NATO anytime soon. He said it in English, anytime soon. What is anytime soon? And I said, well, it's not going to join NATO for the foreseeable future. You know that perfectly well. Fundamentally, it wasn't about, he threatened me at one point and said, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would only take a minute or something like that, jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was taking, the sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have, he was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate. Would immediately tender Russia's resignation from the club of civilized nations. It would be a total disaster for his country. So the current economic punishment that the West has been able to dish out would be massively intensified. Russia would be put into a kind of cryogenic economic freeze. And I think he would lose a lot of the kind of middle ground of global tacit acquiescence. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, you look at Latin America, look at Lula, for instance, who's just been elected again, look at South Asia,
there's a lot of willingness to give Putin the benefit of the doubt. That will go the minute he does anything like that. Well, folks, 2022 is tiptoeing towards the exit after a pretty tumultuous year in which we lost our beloved Queen and saw the start of the worst war in Europe for 80 years. And I want to tell you why I'm looking forward to 2023 and why I am confident that things will get better. Because the economy is going to start to turn around, and we're already seeing signs that inflation is coming down around the world. And because I'm more convinced than ever that Vladimir Putin is going to lose in Ukraine and that the Ukrainians will achieve their destiny to be a free, sovereign and independent country. And our post-COVID, post-pandemic UK, United Kingdom, will finally start to take advantage of all our new freedoms, lengthening our lead as the best place on earth to invest, to start a business, raise a family, or just hang out in the pub, which is what I am going to do, what I propose to do this New Year's Eve. And I wish you all a wonderful 2023.